I need an answer now, Mom. The treatment costs $375,000. I have the money right here in my account. One signature, and you'll live. Tell me why I should save the woman who spent my entire childhood telling me I wasn't worth keeping. My mother's eyes widened, her pale face somehow growing even whiter against the hospital sheets. The monitors beeped steadily beside her, counting down the moments she had left without my help. Isn't it strange how life balances the scales eventually? We never see it coming, but somehow, the person who once held all the power ends up completely at your mercy. Some might call it karma, others divine justice. I just call it Thursday, the day my mother finally understood what it felt like to be completely dependent on someone who had every reason to walk away. Hi there, I hope you're doing well today, whether you're watching this from your cozy bed or during your commute. I'm Nora Keller, and this is the story of how I went from being the disabled daughter hidden in the back bedroom to the successful woman whose signature could save or end my mother's life. How I went from the family disappointment to their last hope. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like mine. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this ends. But let me start from the beginning. I was 23 when I first realized my mother had never actually looked me in the eyes. Not really. Not the way she looked at my brothers and sister. I had spent my life believing I just needed to try harder, achieve more, be less of what I was, a daughter with cerebral palsy who couldn't move through the world the way she wanted me to. I trusted that deep down, she must love me. All mothers love their children, right? That's what the books said, what the movies showed, what everyone believed. I thought if I just became successful enough, independent enough, normal enough, she would finally see me. I believed this with everything I had. I pushed myself beyond what doctors thought possible. I learned to manage my condition through endless physical therapy sessions I arranged myself. I studied twice as hard as my siblings, working through the pain and exhaustion that came with my disability. When my hand cramped so badly I couldn't hold a pen, I taught myself to type with one finger until the spasm passed. When walking across campus left me exhausted, I'd hide in bathroom stalls to catch my breath so no one, especially not my mother, would see my weakness. What I didn't know then was that my mother had already decided my worth the day the doctors diagnosed me. The day she realized her third child wouldn't match the perfect family portrait she had imagined. The day she stopped seeing a daughter and started seeing a burden. If I had known what was waiting for me after college graduation, maybe I would have saved myself all that effort. Maybe I would have realized sooner that in my mother's eyes, I would always be nothing but a mistake she was forced to acknowledge. But I didn't know. And that ignorance, that desperate hope for a mother's love, would both break me and ultimately forge me into someone unbreakable. I grew up in a modest two-story house in Cincinnati with my mother Helen, my father James, and my 3 siblings. Daniel was the oldest, athletic, charming, and the clear favorite. Then came Lily, pretty and obedient, who never questioned our mother's rules. I was third, the one with cerebral palsy that affected the right side of my body. And finally, there was Ben, the baby of the family who could do no wrong. Our family photos told the whole story. Daniel and Lily stood front and center beside Mom, with Ben usually in her arms. I was positioned in the back, partially hidden behind my father, when I was included at all. School events, birthday parties, holiday gatherings, there was always an excuse for why I couldn't be prominently featured. Nora gets tired easily, Mom would explain to relatives. Nora prefers to stay home, she'd tell neighbors. Nora isn't feeling well today, she'd say to teachers. None of it was true, but I learned early that contradicting her only made things worse. Dad was different. He'd sit with me in the evenings, helping with my exercises, telling me stories about resilient people throughout history. You have a fighter's spirit, Nora, he'd whisper. Don't let anyone dim your light. Those moments sustained me, but they were always stolen. Quick connections when Mom was busy with the others. I didn't understand then that he was afraid of her too, in his own way. He loved me, I'm certain, but he never stood up to her. Not really. When I was 12, I overheard a conversation that confirmed what I'd always suspected, but desperately denied. She's going to need support her entire life, James, Mom hissed at Dad in the kitchen. The medical bills are draining us. The special accommodations, the therapy. Do you know what that's doing to the other kids? They're missing out because of her. Dad's voice was quiet. She's our daughter, Helen. I know what she is. Mom's tone was ice. I'm just being practical. We need to start planning for her future care now. Some kind of assisted living once she's of age. She's brilliant, Helen. Her teachers say. Her teachers don't have to live with her limitations every day. I do. I'm the one who has to explain to people why my daughter can't do normal things, why she walks that way, why she needs help. It's exhausting. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound, my heart breaking in real time. I'd spent years trying to be perfect for her, getting straight A's, pushing through physical therapy without complaint, learning to do everything myself so I wouldn't be a burden. But it was never going to be enough. I could cure cancer and walk on the moon, and she would still see me as damaged goods. The following week was my middle school graduation. I'd earned top honors and was selected to give a speech. Mom said she had a migraine that morning. Your father will record it, she promised, not meeting my eyes. I'll watch it later. Dad did record it. I gave the speech without stumbling once, my voice clear and strong despite my shaking right hand. The audience gave me a standing ovation. The principal called me extraordinary. That night, I offered to show Mom the video. Maybe tomorrow, Nora.
I'm tired.
Tomorrow never came. When I checked the camera later, the recording had been deleted. Dad said it must have been an accident. His eyes told a different story. That summer, I turned 13 and made a decision. If I couldn't earn my mother's love, I would earn my freedom from needing it. I doubled down on my studies, knowing education was my ticket out. I joined debate club despite my occasional speech difficulties, training myself to speak slowly and deliberately. I learned to type with adaptive technology when handwriting became too painful. By 16, I'd secured enough credits to graduate early. When the acceptance letter from Northwestern came with a full scholarship, I thought, finally, Mom would see me. The day I showed her the letter, she was organizing Lily's high school graduation party. Streamers and balloons filled our living room. A banner reading, "Congratulations, Lily," stretched across the wall. Northwestern. Mom frowned, barely glancing at the letter. That's very far away. How will you manage on your own? With your condition? I've researched the disability support services, I explained eagerly. They have everything I need, and the scholarship covers everything. I don't think it's a good idea. She turned back to her party preparations. Community college would be more appropriate. Something close to home where we can help you. But I don't need help, I insisted. I can do this. She finally looked at me then, really looked at me, with a mixture of pity and exasperation. Nora, you need to be realistic about your limitations. What happens when you fall? Or when you can't keep up with the workload? Who's going to take care of you? I'll take care of myself. I always have. Don't be dramatic, she sighed. We've done everything for you. The unfairness of it hit me like a slap. My entire childhood flashed before my eyes. The doctor appointments I'd arranged myself when she forgot. The nights I'd struggled alone with homework because she was busy with the others. The way I'd taught myself to button my shirt one-handed because she didn't have the patience to help. You've done nothing for me, I whispered, my voice surprisingly steady. Nothing. Her face hardened. After everything I've sacrificed. Sacrificed? You've ignored me my entire life. You couldn't even watch me give my graduation speech. Lower your voice, she hissed. You're being hysterical. Dad walked in then, eyes darting nervously between us. What's going on? I held up my acceptance letter. I got into Northwestern. Full ride. His face lit up. Nora, that's incredible. He moved to hug me, but Mom's cold voice stopped him. Tell her she can't go, James. Tell her she needs to be practical. Dad looked at me, then at Mom, then down at his hands. His silence was deafening. That was the moment I knew I was truly on my own. The father who had whispered encouragement in the shadows would never stand against her in the light. I packed my bags that night. My Aunt Rebecca, Dad's sister who had always seen me clearly, agreed to let me stay with her until college started. Mom didn't try to stop me. She simply said, "When it gets too hard, don't come crying to us." I walked out the door with everything I owned in 2 suitcases, my right leg dragging slightly as it did when I was tired or stressed. I didn't look back. Northwestern was everything I dreamed and more terrifying than I'd imagined. The campus sprawled across Evanston like a small city, magnificent and overwhelming. My dormitory was a 19th century building with no elevator, just 4 flights of stairs between me and my tiny room. I stood at the bottom of those stairs on move-in day, watching other students bound up with boxes and suitcases, their parents trailing behind with mini fridges and decorations. I was alone with my 2 bags, looking up at what felt like a mountain. "Need a hand?" I turned to see a tall guy with kind eyes and a Northwestern staff shirt. "I've got it," I said automatically, the way I'd been trained to never ask for help. He shrugged.
"Cool.
"But I'm headed up anyway. I could take one of those if it would make your climb easier." Something in his casual offer, the way he didn't look at my uneven stance with pity, the way he presented help as a convenience for both of us rather than charity, broke through my defenses. "That would be nice. Thanks." His name was Marcus, a junior working as a resident advisor. He carried my heavier bag up without comment, chatting about classes and the best coffee shops near campus. When we reached my room, he didn't rush away. "First week can be rough," he said. "We're having a mixer for new students tonight in the common room. You should come." I almost said no out of habit. Social gatherings had always been minefields of stares and awkward questions. But I was reinventing myself. New Nora would say yes. "I'll be there," I promised. That night changed everything. I met Jamie, who would become my roommate the following year, and Professor Elliott, who ran the computer science department and saw potential in my interest in adaptive technology. By midnight, I had friends and a possible research position. 3 weeks into the semester, I received an unexpected package. Inside was a laptop with specialized software for students with motor difficulties and a note from Dad. "Proud of you. Stay strong." No phone call, no visit. Just a tool to help me succeed, and a reminder that his support would always come from a safe distance. I threw myself into college life with a vengeance. While other freshmen were discovering parties and freedom from curfews, I was building the foundation of my future. I joined the Accessible Technology Initiative, working with Professor Elliott to develop apps that could help people with various disabilities navigate daily tasks more easily. Our first project was a voice-activated program that could control home environments, lights, thermostats, locks, without requiring fine motor skills. We called it HomeEase. "This could change lives," Professor Elliott said during one late-night coding session. "Including yours." I looked up from my screen. "I didn't design it for me." He smiled knowingly. "The best innovations come from solving our own problems first." By sophomore year, HomeEase had won a major tech innovation award with a $50,000 prize. The university filed a patent with me as the primary inventor. At 20, I had achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. When the story ran in the university paper, I sent a copy to my parents' address without a note. Mom never mentioned it. Dad called once, his voice hushed as if he was hiding in the garage to make the call.
"We saw the article," he said.
"It's amazing, Nora." "Thanks, Dad." A long pause. "Your mother is, well, she's proud too in her way." The lie hung between us. We both knew better. "How are you doing, really?" he finally asked. "I'm good. Really good. Do you need anything? Money or?"
"No, Dad."
"I don't need anything from home." The word home tasted strange on my tongue. That house in Cincinnati hadn't been home for a long time. After we hung up, I sat in my dorm room looking at the framed award certificate on my wall. The validation felt hollow somehow. I was still that little girl desperately seeking approval from someone who would never give it. That night, I made a second life-changing decision. I would stop seeking validation altogether. I would build something so undeniable that the world's recognition would drown out the silence from my mother. By junior year, HomeEase had evolved into AssistTech, a suite of accessibility applications that caught the attention of major tech companies. Microsoft offered me an internship, followed by a job offer for after graduation. Google countered with something better. Apple topped them both. But I had different plans. Professor Elliot introduced me to Vivian Zhao, a venture capitalist looking to invest in accessible technology. Over coffee that stretched into dinner, I pitched her my vision, a company dedicated solely to developing affordable technology for people with disabilities. No luxury upgrades, no premium versions, just essential tools that everyone could access. Most companies see the disability market as too niche, I explained, my hands gesturing passionately. But there are over 1 billion people worldwide with disabilities. That's not niche, that's underserved. Vivian studied me carefully. You're what, 21? Why not take one of those cushy corporate offers? Build some experience, make connections. Because people like me can't wait another decade for innovation to trickle down. We need solutions now. She smiled then, a sharp, approving grin. How much are you looking for? $2 million in seed funding. She didn't blink. That's ambitious. So am I. 2 weeks later, Vivian introduced me to her investment group. I presented my business plan, demonstrated my prototypes, and answered their skeptical questions with unshakable confidence. By the end of the meeting, I had my seed money and a board of directors who believed in me despite my age and disability, or perhaps because of them. I named the company Enabled. Our tagline, technology that sees your abilities. The day I signed the incorporation papers was surreal. Me, Nora Keller, the girl who couldn't even get her mother to attend her school events, now a CEO with employees and an office in Chicago's tech corridor. That night, I called home. It had been months since I'd spoken to either of my parents. Daniel had graduated law school, Lily was planning her wedding, and Ben was following in Daniel's footsteps at a prestigious university. My achievements didn't fit into family conversations. Mom answered, her voice immediately guarded when she realized it was me. I wanted to share some news, I said, fighting to keep my voice neutral. I've started my own company. We just secured $2 million in funding. Silence on the line. It's called Enabled. We develop technology for people with disabilities. That's nice, she finally said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. I suppose this means you're staying in Chicago permanently? Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Just confirmation that I would remain far away, where she wouldn't have to acknowledge me. Yes, I'm staying in Chicago. Well, Lily's wedding is in June. Will you be coming home for that? Home. There was that word again. I'm not sure. Things are busy with the startup. She's your sister, Nora. Family should be a priority. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. After years of treating me like an afterthought, she was lecturing me about family priorities. I'll send a gift, I said coldly. You know, this attitude of yours is exactly why. I hung up. That call was the last time I would speak to my mother for nearly 4 years. I sent birthday cards to Dad and occasional texts to my siblings, but I drew a hard line. I was done trying to be part of a family that had never truly included me. Instead, I built my own family at Enabled. Jamie joined as our marketing director. Marcus, the kind RA who had carried my bag up those stairs, became our head of user experience after getting his master's. Professor Elliot signed on as our chief technology advisor. Together, we created products that changed lives, voice-activated home systems, subtle mobility aids disguised as fashion accessories, communication tools for nonverbal users. Each launch was more successful than the last. By 26, I was featured in Forbes 30 Under 30. By 27, Enabled had offices in 3 countries. By 28, our annual revenue exceeded $40 million, and I had become the face of accessible technology worldwide. All without a single word of acknowledgement from the woman who had given birth to me. Until the day everything changed. The call came on a Tuesday morning in April. I was reviewing quarterly projections with my executive team when my assistant interrupted. I'm sorry, Miss Keller, but there's a Daniel Keller insisting he needs to speak with you immediately. He says it's a family emergency. My brother and I spoke maybe twice a year. He had never called my office. Excuse me, I said to my team, my stomach tightening with dread. I took the call in my private office, looking out at the Chicago skyline, a view I had earned through years of hard work and determination. Daniel? What's wrong?
His voice was strained.
It's Dad. He had a heart attack last night. The world tilted sideways. My father, the quiet ally who had never been strong enough to truly protect me but had loved me in his limited way, was in danger. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. He's alive, but it's serious. Triple bypass. He's going into surgery in a few hours. I'm coming, I said without hesitation. I'll be on the next flight. Nora, there's more. Daniel hesitated. Dad's company has been in trouble for a while. They've been hiding it from everyone, but they're bankrupt. They laid him off 3 months ago.
What?
This didn't make sense. Dad had worked for the same engineering firm for 30 years. He was a senior project manager. He's been pretending to go to work every day so Mom wouldn't know. The stress probably caused the heart attack. But their health insurance expired with the job. They have nothing, Nora. The surgery alone will cost over $100,000. And that's just the beginning. The implications crashed down on me. My father was critically ill with no insurance, no job, and apparently significant financial problems he'd hidden from everyone. I'll take care of it, I said automatically. All of it. Just make sure they do the surgery. I'll be there tonight. I hung up and immediately called my assistant to arrange a flight, then my CFO to wire money to the hospital. Within an hour, I was in a car to O'Hare, my mind racing. Why hadn't Dad reached out to me? I could have helped months ago. Was his pride that strong? Or was it something else, someone else, who had prevented him from asking his successful daughter for help? The flight to Cincinnati was turbulent, matching my churning thoughts. By the time I landed, Dad was in recovery. The surgery had gone well, but the road ahead would be long and expensive. I headed straight to the hospital, bracing myself for the first face-to-face meeting with my mother in almost 4 years. In my mind, she had remained the cold, disapproving figure of my childhood. I wasn't prepared for the worn, frightened woman I found in the cardiac care waiting room. Nora, she said, rising uncertainly when she saw me. She looked 20 years older than her actual age, her hair completely gray now, her face etched with worry lines. You came. Of course I came. It's Dad. An awkward moment passed between us, neither moving toward an embrace. Daniel broke the tension, stepping forward to hug me. Thank you, he whispered against my hair. For everything. Behind him stood Lily with her husband and 4-year-old daughter, a niece I had never met. Ben was slumped in a corner chair, looking lost. We had all grown up, become adults with our own lives, yet in this moment, we were children again, terrified of losing our father. Except I didn't feel like that frightened child anymore. I was Nora Keller, CEO of a successful international company. I was the one with the power to fix this. I've spoken with the hospital administration, I said, addressing my siblings, but pointedly not my mother. All of Dad's medical expenses are covered. I've also arranged for the best cardiac rehabilitation program in the state once he's discharged. We can't accept that, Mom said quietly. I turned to her, one eyebrow raised. It's already done. It's too much money, she insisted. We'll figure something out. Like Dad figured out hiding his job loss? Like he figured out going without health insurance? My voice was sharper than intended. This isn't the time for pride, Mom. This is about Dad's life. You don't understand our situation, she said, a familiar defensive tone creeping in. Then explain it to me. She looked away. It's complicated. Daniel stepped in. Maybe we should discuss this later. After Dad's stable. I nodded, agreeing to the temporary truce. For the next 3 days, I kept a careful distance from my mother, focusing instead on Dad's recovery and handling the barrage of medical decisions. I slept in his hospital room, worked remotely from a corner chair, and coordinated with my siblings on a rotation system. Mom came and went, always watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. On the 4th day, when Dad was finally moved out of intensive care, she cornered me in the hospital cafeteria. We need to talk about what happens next, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. About your father's care and other things.
I'm listening.
She took a deep breath. The house is in foreclosure. We have 6 weeks before they take it. I set down my coffee. Foreclosure? How long have you been behind on payments? Almost a year. She stared at her hands. James kept saying he could fix it, that a big project was coming through. I didn't know he'd lost his job until the heart attack. When I found his severance paperwork. Why didn't you call me? The question that had been burning inside me for days finally escaped. I could have helped months ago. Her laugh was bitter. Call you? You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with us. With me. With you, I corrected. Not with Dad. Never with Dad. We're a package deal, Nora. We always have been. The unfairness of that statement hit me hard. They had never treated me as part of their package deal. I had always been the outlier, the problem, the burden. What else? I asked, steering away from old wounds. What other financial issues are there? She looked beaten. All her usual defensiveness gone. Everything. Credit card debt. Medical bills from before, from your treatments years ago. Second mortgage. James cashed out his retirement to keep us afloat after the layoff. I did some mental calculations. The situation was far worse than I'd imagined. How much to clear everything? To keep the house and get you back on stable ground?
I don't know exactly.
Hundreds of thousands, probably. It was a significant amount, even for me. Enabled was successful, but we were still reinvesting most profits into research and development. I'll need to see all the paperwork. Everything. No more secrets. She nodded, defeated. What choice do I have? That afternoon, I called Marcus back in Chicago. I need you to take over operations for a while, I explained. I'm staying in Cincinnati indefinitely. Is your dad okay? He will be. But the situation here is complicated. They're about to lose everything. I need to sort it out. Marcus didn't question further. That was one of the things I loved about him, his ability to trust my decisions without demanding justifications. Over the next week, as Dad grew stronger, I immersed myself in my parents' financial disaster. The numbers were staggering. Years of poor decisions, hidden debts, and finally the job loss had created a perfect storm of financial ruin. Daniel helped when he could, but his own family responsibilities limited his contribution. Lily and her husband were struggling with a second baby on the way, and Ben was still finishing college on scholarships. I was the only one who could fix this. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they had underestimated was now their salvation. When Dad was finally discharged, I moved into my old bedroom to help with his recovery. The room was exactly as I'd left it years ago. Honor certificates on the walls, bookshelves crammed with medical and computer science texts, a twin bed with the same blue comforter. It felt like sleeping in a museum dedicated to a past life. Every night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the house, Dad's oxygen machine whirring, Mom's footsteps as she checked on him hourly, the familiar creak of the stairs I'd navigated carefully with my uneven gait for 18 years. During the days, I worked remotely, running Enabled from my childhood desk while helping Mom with Dad's care. We established an uneasy alliance, circling each other cautiously, speaking only about practical matters. Until the morning I found her sobbing at the kitchen table, surrounded by foreclosure notices and past-due medical bills. I can't do this, she whispered when she saw me. I can't lose him and the house and everything else. Something shifted in me then. Not forgiveness, I wasn't ready for that, but perhaps understanding. My mother had always been terrified of vulnerability, of things she couldn't control. My disability had represented both to her, a child who was vulnerable and a situation she couldn't fix or manage. And now, her entire life was spinning beyond her control. You're not going to lose anything, I said firmly. I promised Dad I'd handle this, and I will. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed.
Why?
After everything. Why would you help us? I considered my answer carefully. Because I'm not you. The words hung between us, heavy with decades of hurt and rejection. Her flinch told me she understood exactly what I meant. That afternoon, I called my financial team and liquidated some of my personal investments, not company funds, but my own savings. I arranged for a lump sum payment to clear the mortgage debt and set up a trust for my parents' future expenses, including Dad's ongoing medical care. When I presented the documents to my parents, Dad wept openly. Nora, we can't accept this. It's too much. You can and you will, I said gently. Consider it payback for the laptop you sent me freshman year. He smiled through his tears, understanding the gesture for what it was, acknowledgement of the small ways he had tried to support me, even when he couldn't stand against Mom. Mom said nothing, just stared at the papers with an unreadable expression. Later that night, as I worked late in my room, she appeared in my doorway. She looked small somehow, diminished. You didn't have to do this, she said. I continued typing, not looking up. Yes, I did. We don't deserve your help. I don't deserve your help. That made me pause. It was the closest thing to self-awareness I'd ever heard from her. No, I agreed, finally meeting her eyes. You don't. She flinched but didn't leave. I was wrong about you, about what you could become. I know. Is that all you have to say? A flash of the old Helen appeared, defensive, expecting absolution without truly earning it. I closed my laptop and turned to face her fully. What do you want from me, Mom? Forgiveness? Understanding? You spent my entire childhood making me feel worthless because of something I couldn't control. You made me believe I was a burden, an embarrassment, something to be hidden away. I was trying to protect you, she insisted. The world is cruel to people who are different. No, I said firmly. You were protecting yourself. From discomfort. From having to explain me to your friends. From having to adjust your perfect family image. She didn't deny it, which surprised me. The old Helen would have doubled down, twisted the narrative, made herself the victim. I thought I was doing what was best, she said quietly. For who? She had no answer to that. As the weeks passed, Dad grew stronger. I continued working from Cincinnati, flying to Chicago occasionally for crucial meetings but maintaining my base at my parent house. The arrangement was temporary, I told myself, just until they were back on their feet. But something unexpected was happening. Small, nearly imperceptible shifts in my relationship with my mother. She began asking questions about my company, actually listening to my answers. She started leaving coffee by my workspace in the mornings. Once, she even asked to see a demonstration of our newest product, a discrete mobility aid that could predict and compensate for balance issues. This would have helped you as a child, she observed, watching the demonstration video on my laptop. That's why I designed it, I replied. So, the next generation of kids like me will have tools I didn't. She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. You're extraordinary, Nora. I don't know how you became who you are. I became who I am despite you, not because of you, I said, the words more tired than bitter now. She nodded, accepting the truth of it. I know. Just as things were finding a new equilibrium, disaster struck again. Dad developed a post-surgical infection, landing him back in the hospital with sepsis. The doctors were concerned but hopeful. With aggressive treatment, he should recover. The night he was readmitted, I found Mom in the hospital chapel, her head bowed. He'll be okay, I said, sitting beside her. The antibiotics are already working. She nodded without looking up. I can't lose him, Nora. He's the only one who ever loved me exactly as I am. The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. Wasn't that exactly what she had denied me? Love without conditions? He'll pull through, I repeated, unable to offer more comfort than that. She turned to me then, her eyes desperate. If he doesn't, I have nothing left. No one. The unspoken question hung between us. Would I still help her if Dad died? Would I still honor my financial commitments? Or would I leave her to face the consequences of years of poor choices and cruel treatment? I didn't answer. I honestly didn't know. Dad survived the infection, but the episode left him weaker. His recovery would take months, not weeks as we'd initially hoped. I extended my leave from Enabled, setting up a more permanent remote office in my childhood bedroom. 2 months into my stay, I was searching for Dad's insurance paperwork when I found a locked file cabinet in his home office. The key was taped to the bottom of his desk drawer, classic Dad, hiding things in plain sight. Inside, I found decades of neatly organized medical records.
Mine.
This wasn't unusual in itself. My condition had generated mountains of paperwork over the years. What caught my attention was a thick folder labeled Treatment Options Denied. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were detailed treatment plans, experimental therapy programs, and specialized physical therapy regimens, all dated throughout my childhood and adolescence. Each bore the same red stamp: insurance claim denied. But attached to each denial was a letter from my father appealing the decision, followed by another denial, followed by another appeal. Year after year, treatment after treatment. Dad had been fighting for me all along. The last page in the folder was a bank statement showing a second mortgage taken out on the house when I was 15, the exact amount needed for an intensive physical therapy program at the Mayo Clinic. A program I'd never attended. I sat back, my mind racing. If the money had been secured but I'd never received the treatment, where had it gone? The answer came in the form of another folder, this one labeled Lily, Stanford. Inside were tuition statements, housing deposits, and meal plans for my sister's undergraduate education at one of the most expensive universities in the country. The second mortgage that should have funded my treatment had paid for Lily's college instead. Someone had made that decision. Someone had decided her education was more important than my health. I knew exactly who that someone was. I confronted her that evening in the kitchen, slapping both folders on the table while she was preparing dinner. "Explain this," I demanded. Mom glanced at the folders, her face instantly draining of color. "You had no right to go through your father's private files." That's your response? Not an explanation of why my therapy money went to Lily's tuition. She set down her knife carefully. "You wouldn't have qualified for the program anyway. The doctors said your case was too advanced." "That's a lie. I have the acceptance letter right here." I pulled it from the folder, waving it in her face. "They were ready to take me. They thought they could improve my mobility by 40%. It was experimental. There were no guarantees." "So, you decided it wasn't worth trying? You decided my walking normally wasn't as important as Lily going to her dream school?" Mom's jaw tightened. "We had limited resources, Nora. We had to make hard choices." "No, you made that choice. Dad fought for me. He appealed every insurance denial. He took out a mortgage to pay for my treatment. And then you diverted the money to Lily. Stanford opened doors for her that what? That I would never walk through because I was damaged goods? Not worth the investment." "That's not fair," she protested weakly. "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "Was it fair when you made me hide in my room during dinner parties? Was it fair when you forgot to tell me about school events because you were embarrassed by my limp? Was it fair when you told Dad my condition was too draining on the family?" Her head snapped up. "You heard that conversation." "I heard everything, Mom. Every whispered comment, every sigh when I took too long to do something, every excuse you made to keep me invisible." She sank into a chair, suddenly looking her age. "You don't understand what it was like, Nora. Having a child with special needs changes everything. The constant doctor appointments, the stares from strangers, the endless expenses. I lived it." I slammed my hand on the table. "I was that child. Do you think it was easier for me? Do you think I didn't see how differently you treated Daniel and Lily and Ben? How you celebrated their every achievement while ignoring mine? I was trying to protect you from disappointment," she insisted. "No, you were trying to protect yourself from having a less than perfect child. And now look at us." I gestured around the kitchen. "Your perfect children can't help you. The burden, the disappointment, the one you never thought would amount to anything, I'm the only one who can save you." The irony hung between us like a physical presence. "I was wrong about you," she whispered. "I've admitted that. Being wrong isn't enough, Mom.
You stole from me.
You took away a treatment that might have changed my entire life because you decided I wasn't worth it. I was trying to do what was best for the family as a whole. I was part of that family."
Or was I?
The question that had haunted me my entire childhood finally escaped. Was I ever really your daughter? Or just a problem you had to manage? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "Of course you were my daughter. Then why couldn't you love me the way I was? Why wasn't I enough?" Her silence was answer enough. I gathered the folders and turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. I was afraid, she said softly. I paused but didn't turn around. I was afraid I couldn't be what you needed, that I would fail you. So I kept my distance. It was easier than facing my inadequacy every day. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. Your fear destroyed my childhood, I said, my back still to her. And now your fear is destroying what's left of your life. I walked out, leaving her alone in the kitchen with the remnants of an unfinished dinner and 29 years of unforgivable choices. That night, I called Marcus. We'd been dancing around a relationship for years, colleagues who had become friends who had become something more, though neither of us had put a label on it. I need to come home, I said when he answered. To Chicago?
Yes.
To my real home. He didn't ask for explanations. When? As soon as I can arrange care for Dad. My voice cracked. I can't stay here anymore, Marcus. Not with her. What happened? I told him everything. The diverted treatment money, the years of deliberate neglect, the final confirmation of what I'd always suspected. I had never been a priority to my mother. I'm so sorry, Nora, he said when I finished. But I'm not surprised. What do you mean? The first time you told me about your family, about your mom, I knew. Some parents they can't accept anything that challenges their vision of a perfect life. It's not about you. It never was. His words were a balm I hadn't known I needed. It wasn't about me. My disability hadn't made me unlovable. Her inability to adapt had made her incapable of loving me properly. I've arranged for a private nurse for Dad, I continued, and the trust will cover all their expenses. I've done everything I can, Marcus. I can't fix her. I can't make her into the mother I needed. You don't have to, he said gently. You just have to decide what you need now.
What I needed now.
Such a simple concept, yet one I'd rarely considered. I'd spent my life either trying to please my mother or trying to prove her wrong. What did I want, separate from that exhausting dynamic? I need to come home, I repeated. To my life. I hesitated, then took the leap.
To you.
His smile was audible. I'll be waiting. The next morning, I informed my parents of my decision. Dad understood, though he was disappointed. Mom said nothing, just watched with that unreadable expression as I outlined the care arrangements I'd made. The nurse starts tomorrow, I explained. The trust is set up to pay all the bills automatically. I've scheduled Dad's follow-up appointments for the next 3 months and arranged transportation. You've thought of everything, Dad said, reaching for my hand. As always. Almost everything, I corrected, pulling out one last document. This is the paperwork for a reverse mortgage on the house. It will provide additional monthly income to supplement your pension, Dad. But both of you need to sign. Mom stared at the papers. So that's it? You've solved all our problems, and now you're leaving. I've solved all your financial problems, I clarified. The other problems, the ones between us, those aren't so easily fixed. And you're not interested in trying. It wasn't a question. I met her gaze steadily. I've been trying my entire life, Mom. Now it's your turn. I left the next day, my car packed with the few belongings I'd brought. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my mother standing at the window, watching me go. For the first time, I didn't feel a pang of guilt or longing, just relief. I was going home. To my real home, my real life, my real family of chosen people who valued me exactly as I was. Or so I thought. I returned to Chicago believing I'd closed a chapter. I threw myself back into work, making up for my 3-month absence with 16-hour days and weekend strategy sessions. Enabled was preparing to launch our most ambitious product yet, an affordable exoskeleton that could help people with mobility issues walk more naturally. The technology had personal significance. It was what that Mayo Clinic program might have done for me as a teenager, now available to anyone who needed it. Marcus and I grew closer, finally acknowledging what had been building between us for years. He moved into my downtown apartment, and for the first time, I experienced what a healthy, supportive relationship felt like. No conditions, no disappointment, no need to be anything other than exactly who I was. For months after leaving Cincinnati, I received an unexpected call from Lily. "It's Mom," she said without preamble. "She's sick." A familiar dread pooled in my stomach. What kind of sick?
Cancer. Advanced.
They're saying maybe 6 months. The news hit me like a physical blow. Not because I loved my mother. Our relationship was too damaged for that simple emotion, but because the timing felt like some cosmic joke. Just when I'd finally freed myself from her, just when I'd found peace with leaving her behind. What kind of cancer? My voice sounded strange, detached. Pancreatic. Stage 4. They caught it too late. Pancreatic. One of the most aggressive forms. 6 months was optimistic. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "Is Dad holding up okay?" Lily's laugh was bitter. "Dad doesn't know. He had another heart episode last month. The doctors say his heart is too weak for major stress. We've told him she has a minor liver problem that needs monitoring." "So, he doesn't know his wife is dying?"
No.
"And Mom wants to keep it that way as long as possible." I processed this information, trying to decide how I felt.
Sad?
Angry?
Relieved?
The emotions were too tangled to separate. "Why are you calling me, Lily? There's nothing I can do." Her silence spoke volumes. "Lily, the treatment," she finally said. "There's an experimental trial at MD Anderson. It could extend her life, maybe even put her in remission. But insurance won't cover it, and it costs, let me guess, about $375,000. How did you know?" I closed my eyes, the irony not lost on me. The same amount as that second mortgage taken out for my treatment and diverted to Lily's education. "Just a coincidence," I said. "What does Mom say about all this?" "She refuses to ask you for help. Says she doesn't deserve it. But Nora, she's our mother. Whatever happened between you two, and I know it was bad, worse than I probably understand, she's still our mother. And I'm still her daughter, the one she couldn't love because I wasn't perfect." Lily sighed. "I know she hurt you, but people change, especially when facing death. Couldn't you at least talk to her?" I promised to think about it, but hung up with no intention of returning to Cincinnati. I'd already done more than enough for the woman who had treated me like a burden my entire life. Let the perfect children figure it out for once. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the folders in Dad's office, the evidence of his fight for me, juxtaposed with my mother's betrayal. I thought about Dad, still recovering, unaware that he was about to lose his wife. I thought about my siblings, who despite their privileges, did love our mother. And I thought about my mother, facing a painful death with the knowledge that her least favorite child, the one she had rejected and undermined, was the only one who could possibly save her. "You're going back, aren't you?" Marcus asked, watching me pack a small suitcase the next morning. "I'm just going to talk to her doctors," I insisted. "Get the full picture. That doesn't mean I'm paying for the treatment." He smiled knowingly. "Of course not. Don't look at me like that. She doesn't deserve my help." "Maybe not. But you deserve to make this decision with all the facts. And maybe," he hesitated, "maybe you deserve closure too." I arrived in Cincinnati that afternoon and went straight to the hospital where Mom was undergoing standard chemotherapy, palliative care to extend her life slightly, not the experimental treatment that might actually save her. She didn't know I was coming. When I walked into her room, she was alone, staring out the window with a lost expression that made her look older than her 61 years. The vibrant, controlling woman I remembered had been replaced by this frail figure in a hospital gown, her gray hair thin from treatment, her sharp features now gaunt. "Nora?" She blinked as if not trusting her eyes. "What are you doing here?" "Lily called me," I said, remaining in the doorway. "Told me about your diagnosis." She shouldn't have done that. Probably not. But here I am. We stared at each other across the room, the weight of our shared history too heavy for casual conversation. "You look well," she finally said. "Success suits you." "And you look terrible," I replied honestly. "Cancer suits no one." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Still direct as ever. It saves time. I moved further into the room, taking in the machines, the medication schedule on the whiteboard, the family photos on the nightstand. Photos that included my siblings and dad, but none of me. Some things never changed. I met with your oncologist before coming up, I said, getting to the point. He told me about the trial at MD Anderson. She stiffened. Lily had no right. Lily loves you and doesn't want you to die. Can you blame her for trying everything? I don't want your money, Nora. I haven't offered it. That stopped her. We both knew why I was really there, what Lily had asked me to do, but my words created a temporary impasse. How's your father? She asked, changing the subject. Stable but fragile. Does he really not know? She shook her head. It would kill him. Literally. His heart can't take the stress. So you're lying to him during whatever time you have left together. That seems counterproductive. I'm protecting him, she insisted. Just like I always have. Like you protected me? The words escaped before I could stop them. By deciding I wasn't worth that treatment money? Her eyes widened. So that's why you left so suddenly. You found those files. Yes. She sighed, looking down at her hands, thin and spotted now, with an 4-port taped to one wrist. I made many mistakes as a mother, Nora. That was probably the worst. The admission surprised me. The old Helen would have justified her actions, twisted them into some noble sacrifice. Why Lily? I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. Why was her education more important than my mobility? She was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I knew you would succeed no matter what. Even with your disability, you had something special, a determination that couldn't be broken. Lily needed every advantage we could give her. She wasn't strong like you. I stared at her, processing this twisted logic. So, I was punished for being strong? For adapting to the disability you despised? I never despised your disability, Nora. I despised my inability to fix it, to make your life easier. Every time I looked at you struggling, I was reminded of my failure as a mother. So you looked away. I need more time, I said finally. I need to understand what I really want from this situation. Then take the time, he said simply. As I sat there surrounded by the paper trail of my childhood, something shifted in my understanding. These weren't just records of my mother's failure. They were records of my father's love, imperfect though it was. Of my own resilience in the face of rejection. Of a family dynamic that had shaped me into the woman I had become. The woman who now had to make an impossible choice. I arrived at the hospital the next morning with dark circles under my eyes but a clear decision in my mind. Mom was awake, picking at her breakfast tray without enthusiasm. She looked surprised to see me so early. I spoke with Dr. Okafor at MD Anderson yesterday, I said, taking the chair beside her bed. There's a spot open in the trial. Last one for months. She set down her fork. Nora. Let me finish. I took a deep breath. It costs $375,000. Exactly the amount that should have gone to my treatment all those years ago. Exactly the amount that went to Lily's education instead. Her eyes dropped to her hands. I've been asking myself what the right thing to do is. Whether I should pay it. Whether you deserve a second chance. I don't, she said quietly. We both know that. Maybe not. But here's what I've realized. This isn't about what you deserve. It's about who I am and who I want to be. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward her. The transfer to MD Anderson was already complete. I've paid for the treatment. Her hand flew to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. Nora, I can't. You can and you will. The medical transport is scheduled for Monday. You'll spend 6 weeks in Houston for the initial treatment phase. I've arranged for an apartment near the hospital and hired a part-time caregiver to help with day-to-day things. What about your father? I can't just leave. Dad knows everything. I told him this morning. Her face paled. You told him I'm dying? I told him you have cancer, but that there's a promising treatment. That you hid it because you were trying to protect him, but that now you need his strength. He's packing your bags as we speak. His heart. is stronger than you think, just like mine was, just like yours needs to be. I leaned forward. But there are conditions to my help, Mom. She nodded, waiting. First, no more secrets. Not from Dad, not from me, not from yourself. Complete honesty from now on. Agreed. Second, this is a loan, not a gift. If the treatment works, you'll pay me back every cent. Her eyebrows rose.
How?
We have nothing. You have skills. You were an excellent accountant before you quit to raise us. The trust one set up for you, and Dad generates enough for living expenses, but you'll work part-time doing bookkeeping for Enabled once you're well enough. From home, on your schedule, but actual work. You would trust me with your company finances? I would trust you to earn your second chance, I corrected. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. And the third condition? I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part, the part I'd struggled with most during my sleepless night. You need to understand that paying for this treatment doesn't erase the past. It doesn't fix what was broken between us. That will take time and consistent effort on your part. I understand, she whispered. I'm not doing this because I've forgiven you. I'm doing it because I refuse to make decisions the way you did, based on who deserves help rather than who needs it. She flinched but nodded again. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal mother-daughter relationship, I continued. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But at least we'll have the chance to find out. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the money, but for the chance to try to make amends. To be better. I stood, gathering my purse. The MD Anderson coordinator will call with details. Dad will drive you to the airport on Monday. I need to get back to Chicago. We're launching a new product next week. Will you? She hesitated. Will you come visit? In Houston. I don't know, I answered honestly. I need some time, Mom. This decision was hard enough. She accepted this with a grace I wouldn't have expected from her a year ago. Whatever you decide, Nora, I want you to know something. I waited. I am so proud of who you've become. Not because of your success or your company, though those are remarkable, but because you've become the kind of person who would help even someone who failed you so badly. The kind of person I should have been. For the first time since I'd returned to Cincinnati, I felt the tight knot in my chest loosen slightly. Get better first, I said. We'll figure out the rest as we go. On the flight back to Chicago, I stared out the window at the patchwork of fields and cities below, thinking about choices. My mother's choices that had shaped my childhood. My choice to help her despite our history. The choices that awaited us both in the uncertain future. Marcus was waiting at O'Hare when I landed, his familiar face a welcome sight after the emotional marathon of the past week. How did it go? He asked, pulling me into a hug. I paid for the treatment, I said against his shoulder. She leaves for Houston on Monday. He pulled back to look at me. Are you okay with that decision? I considered the question carefully. I think so. It wasn't about her in the end. It was about me. About not letting her failures shape my choices. I'm proud of you, he said, taking my bag. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but something unexpected happened. I smiled slightly. I feel lighter, like I'm finally free of needing her approval or resenting its absence. As we walked through the terminal toward the exit, I realized it was true. For the first time in my life, I wasn't defined by my relationship with my mother. Neither by her rejection nor by my reaction to it. I was simply Nora, making choices based on my own values. Whether my mother lived or died, whether we reconciled or remained distant, I had found the peace that had eluded me my entire life. I had discovered my own worth, independent of anyone else's assessment. And that, more than any business success or financial achievement, felt like the greatest victory of all. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the National Disability Innovation Awards, adjusting my blazer and trying to calm my racing heart. Enabled's exoskeleton, now named the Freedom Frame, had been nominated for Innovation of the Year, and I was minutes away from presenting it to the audience of industry leaders, investors, and disability advocates. 5 minutes, Ms. Keller, a production assistant said, handing me a bottle of water. I nodded, checking my phone one last time. A text from Marcus. You've got this. We're all here cheering for you. Here meant the front row, where the enabled team sat alongside my father. Dad had flown in from Cincinnati specifically for this event, his health finally stable enough for travel. Next to him, surprising everyone including me, sat my mother. The experimental treatment had worked better than anyone dared hope. After 3 months at MD Anderson, her cancer was in remission. She'd returned to Cincinnati thin and tired but alive, with a cautious prognosis of years rather than months. True to her word, she'd started working remotely for Enabled, handling accounts payable with meticulous precision. Our relationship remained complicated. Weekly phone calls, occasional visits, small steps towards something that might one day resemble healing. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps understanding. I hadn't planned to invite her tonight. This was my moment, my company's achievement, and part of me still feared she would find some way to diminish it. But Dad had asked, his eyes hopeful, and I'd found myself agreeing. It would mean everything to her, he'd said. She talks about your work constantly, reads every article about Enabled. He'd paused, searching for the right word. Proud, Nora. Genuinely proud. So here she was, seated beside my father in a wig that covered her regrown hair, watching me prepare to unveil the product that could change millions of lives. 2 minutes, the assistant called. I took a deep breath and focused on the teleprompter screen, reviewing my speech one last time. I built Enabled because I know what it's like to be defined by what you can't do rather than what you can, to be measured against an arbitrary standard of physical normalcy and found wanting, to be seen as a burden rather than a person with unlimited potential. The words were flowing now, unrehearsed but deeply felt. The Freedom Frame won't solve every problem or erase every obstacle, but it will give thousands of people the chance I never had, to move through the world with greater ease, to conserve their energy for living rather than just navigating, to be seen for their abilities rather than their limitations. I returned to the podium for my conclusion, my eyes finding my mother again. Her face was tear-streaked now, but she held my gaze without flinching. We named our device the Freedom Frame because that's what it offers, freedom. From physical constraints, yes, but also from the constraints others place on your potential. Freedom to define your own worth, to write your own story, to create your own success. I smiled, feeling a sense of completion, of coming full circle. I stand before you today as living proof that limitations, whether physical or imposed by others, don't define what's possible. They simply clarify what's necessary. Sometimes what's necessary is an exoskeleton. Sometimes it's the determination to succeed despite every obstacle. Usually it's both. The applause started before I finished, building to a standing ovation that rolled through the auditorium like a wave. In the front row, my team was on their feet, cheering wildly. My father was crying openly, unashamed of his tears. And my mother, my complicated, flawed, now humbled mother, stood with them, her eyes never leaving mine, her expression a complex mixture of regret, pride, and something that might have been love. As the applause continued, Senator Willis returned to the stage, an envelope in her hand. "I think we know who this year's Innovation Award goes to," she said into the microphone, opening the envelope with theatrical flair. Enabled Technologies and the Freedom Frame. Another wave of applause as I accepted the crystal trophy, holding it up for my team to see. This was their achievement too. Marcus with his user experience insights, Jamie with her brilliant marketing, Professor Elliott with his technical guidance, and every engineer, designer, and tester who had believed in our mission. As the ceremony concluded and people began filing toward the reception area, I made my way to where my team waited. Hugs, congratulations, celebratory selfies, the normal aftermath of a major achievement. Dad embraced me tightly, whispering, "Your mother needs to speak with you." In private, I found her in a quiet corner of the reception hall, standing alone, one hand clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Congratulations," she said when I approached. I don't have words, Nora." "Thank you for coming," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "It meant a lot to Dad. And to me." She hesitated, then reached into her purse. I have something for you. Something I should have given you years ago. She handed me an envelope, worn at the edges as if it had been carried for a long time. Inside was a bank check for $375,000, the exact amount of my mother's treatment. I sold my jewelry collection, she explained. The art pieces. Everything of value I had left. It's taken 6 months to liquidate it all, but the final piece sold last week. I stared at the check. Mom, your treatment was a loan, not a demand for immediate repayment. You're still recovering. Your job at Enabled was supposed to be how you paid it back over time. This isn't about our agreement. She straightened her shoulders. This is about making something right that should never have been wrong. The money that should have gone to your treatment 20 years ago is finally going where it belongs, to you. I don't need it, I said honestly. Enabled is doing well. I'm doing well. I know. She smiled sadly. Use it for a scholarship fund then. Or research. Or whatever you think best. The point is, it's yours now, as it always should have been. Before I could respond, she continued, her voice stronger than I'd heard since before her illness. What you said on stage, about being defined by what others think you can't do, I did that to you. I put those limitations on you, not because of what you couldn't do, but because of what I couldn't face. My own fear, my own inadequacy as a mother. For once, her self-reflection didn't feel like a bid for sympathy. It was simply the truth, plainly stated. Your speech tonight, she went on. It made me realize something. All those years I spent thinking I needed to fix you or hide you, you were never broken. I was. The honesty between us felt new and fragile, like thin ice over deep water. For 29 years, our relationship had been built on performance and disappointment. This raw truth was unfamiliar territory. I can't undo what I did, she said. But I want you to know that I see you now, Nora. I really see you. The remarkable woman you've become, the lives you're changing, the strength you've always had. And I am so sorry it took me nearly losing everything to recognize what was right in front of me all along. There was nothing performative in her words, no manipulation or guilt behind them. Just a simple, devastating acknowledgement of the truth we'd both lived. I don't know if that means anything after all this time, she finished quietly. But I needed to say it. Not for forgiveness, I don't expect that, but because it's true, and you deserve to hear it. I looked down at the check in my hands, then back at my mother. This woman who had shaped me through both her cruelty and her absence, who had rejected me and now stood before me humbled by her own mortality and mistakes. I don't know what happens next with us, I said honestly. I don't know if we can build something new from so much broken history. Neither do I, she admitted. But I'd like to try if you're willing. On your terms, at your pace. I tucked the check into my pocket, neither accepting nor rejecting what it represented. Let's start with tonight, I suggested. The team is heading to dinner to celebrate. You and Dad should join us. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even a promise of reconciliation. But it was an open door, a recognition that our story wasn't finished yet, that there might be chapters ahead neither of us could yet imagine. She nodded, understanding exactly what I was offering. We liked that very much. As we walked toward the others, I felt that same lightness I'd experienced after deciding to pay for her treatment, not because our relationship was fixed, but because I was finally free to define it on my own terms. The power had shifted, not through revenge or rejection, but through success and self-worth that no one, not even my mother, could diminish. Tonight, in that auditorium, I hadn't just launched a product. I had reclaimed my narrative, not as the disabled daughter who wasn't worth investing in, but as the visionary who had transformed that rejection into innovation that would help thousands. It was perhaps the most powerful revenge of all, not to hurt her back, but to succeed so completely that her opinion no longer mattered. The Freedom Frames launch exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Within 6 months, we had orders from rehabilitation centers across the country. Within a year, insurance companies began covering it as a cost-effective alternative to more expensive mobility devices. Within 18 months, we had distribution partnerships in 12 countries. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the videos that flooded our social media. Children taking independent steps for the first time, adults returning to activities they'd abandoned years ago, elderly users regaining confidence in their movement. Each story was a validation of what I'd known all along, that assistive technology shouldn't be a luxury for the privileged few, but a right for anyone who needed it. The company expanded rapidly, outgrowing our Chicago headquarters and opening offices in Boston, London, and Singapore. Our product line diversified to include devices for various disabilities, not just mobility issues, but visual, auditory, and cognitive challenges as well. My personal life flourished alongside the business. Marcus and I were married in a small ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan, with Jamie as my maid of honor and Professor Elliot giving me away. My father walked with a cane now, his heart condition requiring a more measured pace, but he had recovered well enough to dance one careful dance with me at the reception. My mother attended too, sitting quietly through the ceremony, offering congratulations that seemed genuinely warm. Our relationship had found a new equilibrium, not the close mother-daughter bond some families enjoyed, but a respectful connection based on who we were now rather than who we had been. She continued working for Enabled, her financial expertise proving valuable as the company grew more complex. She never asked for special treatment as the CEO's mother. If anything, she worked harder than her position required, as if still atoning for past mistakes. The $375,000 check she'd given me that night at the awards ceremony became the seed money for what we called the Second Chance Fund, a foundation that provided grants to adults with disabilities who had aged out of pediatric services and needed support for education, adaptive equipment, or career training. It was, I thought, a fitting use for money that represented both lost opportunity and unexpected redemption. 3 years after the Freedom Frame launch, I found myself back in Cincinnati for an unusual occasion. My mother had organized a fundraiser for the Second Chance Fund, leveraging her renewed connections in the community to secure donations from local businesses and wealthy families. The event was held at the Art Museum where she had once served on the board, before financial disaster and illness had stripped away her social standing. Her return as the mother of a successful tech CEO rather than as a society matron represented its own kind of redemption arc. I watched from the sidelines as she worked the room, explaining Enabled's mission to former friends with the passion of a true convert. There was no falseness in her advocacy. She had become genuinely devoted to the cause of accessibility and inclusion. "She's different," Dad said, appearing beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. "Since the cancer, since everything, she's changed in ways I never thought possible." I accepted the champagne, clinking my glass against his. "People can surprise you. You never gave up on her," he observed, "even when you had every right to." "I nearly did," I reminded him, "more than once. But you didn't. That's what matters." I smiled, watching my mother across the room. "I think what matters is that we both chose differently than we might have. She chose honesty after a lifetime of pretense. I chose compassion after years of justified resentment. And now look at us," he said, gesturing to the elegant crowd, the Enabled logos displayed prominently, the Freedom Frame demonstration happening in the museum courtyard. Who would have imagined this? Not me, I admitted. Definitely not the girl who left home with 2 suitcases and a determination never to look back. Later that evening, my mother took the stage to introduce me to the gathered donors. Her hair had grown back fully white after the chemotherapy, giving her a distinguished appearance that suited her better than the artificial blonde she'd maintained for decades. "Many of you have known me for years," she began, her voice steady. "You knew me as Helen Keller, James's wife, Daniel, Lily, Nora, and Ben's mother. A woman who served on boards and chaired committees and hosted the Christmas Gala for 15 consecutive years." She paused, surveying the familiar faces. "What you didn't know, what I didn't allow anyone to see, was how profoundly I failed one of my children. How I allowed fear and ignorance to blind me to her extraordinary potential. How I made decisions that prioritized appearance over compassion, conformity over possibility." A hush fell over the room. This kind of raw honesty was unexpected in the polite society of Cincinnati fundraisers. That child grew up to become the woman I'm about to introduce, a visionary who has changed thousands of lives, who built a global company based on the radical idea that disability doesn't diminish worth, that everyone deserves the tools to move through the world with dignity. Her eyes found mine in the crowd, holding my gaze with unusual directness. I can't claim credit for her success. That belongs entirely to her brilliance, her determination, her refusal to accept the limitations others tried to place on her, including, especially, the limitations I tried to place on her. She took a deep breath, composing herself. What I can claim is the profound privilege of witnessing her journey, of being given a second chance. I didn't deserve to see the woman she has become and the lives she has touched. She gestured toward me. It is my honor to introduce my daughter, Nora Keller, founder and CEO of Enabled Technologies and the most courageous person I have ever known. As I walked to the stage amid applause, I felt a peculiar sense of completion. Not because our relationship was perfect, it never would be, but because we had both finally acknowledged the truth of our shared history and found a way to move forward carrying that truth rather than hiding from it. I embraced my mother briefly before taking the microphone, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. "Thank you, Mom," I said simply, turning to address the audience. My speech that night wasn't about disability or technology or innovation. It was about second chances, how they're rarely perfect or complete, how they don't erase the past but can transform the future, how they require courage from both the person offering forgiveness and the person acknowledging fault. As I spoke, I saw my mother listening intently, nodding at points that resonated, occasionally wiping away a tear. She was hearing me, truly hearing me, perhaps for the first time in my life. And I was speaking not from old wounds, but from hard-won wisdom. After the event, as we gathered in my parents' living room, the same house I'd stormed out of years ago, now saved from foreclosure and filled with new memories, my mother handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, opening it to find a stack of papers. "Mortgage documents," she explained. "The house is paid off as of last month. Your father and I would like to donate it to the Second Chance Fund when we're gone, as a residence for young adults with disabilities transitioning to independent living." I looked up, surprised. "Mom, this is your home." "It's just a house," she said simply. "One with a complicated history for you. I'd like its future to be better than its past." The gesture touched me deeply, not just the financial generosity, but the recognition of how this space had failed to be a true home for me and her desire to transform it into something healing for others. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "That's perfect, actually." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, something that had once been rare but had become more common in recent years. "I can't change who I was, Nora. But I can choose who I am now and who I'll be for whatever time I have left." "That's all any of us can do," I agreed. Later that night, after my parents had gone to bed, I sat on the back porch looking at the yard where I'd once played cautiously, always aware of my limitations, always trying not to draw attention to my differences. The swing set was long gone, replaced by my father's garden, but the memories remained. Marcus joined me, wrapping a blanket around our shoulders against the autumn chill. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "I was thinking about journeys," I replied. "How rarely they end where we expect." "Regrets?" he asked. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret the pain, the rejection, the years of fighting to prove my worth? Would I trade my hard-won success for an easier path, a mother who had embraced me fully from the beginning? "No," I said finally.
No regrets.
Every step, even the painful ones, led me here, to Enabled, to the Freedom Frame, to you.
He squeezed my hand. To us.
To us, I agreed. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge above my childhood home, a place that had once represented confinement, but now felt like just another stop on a journey that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The past would always be there, its lessons etched into who I had become. But the future remained unwritten, full of possibilities I was finally free to embrace without the weight of old wounds holding me back. My phone buzzed with a notification, a video message from a Freedom Frame user in Australia, a teenage girl showing off her first unaided steps after years of using a wheelchair. Her face glowed with pride and possibility. I showed Marcus, both of us smiling at the girl's joy. "That's why we do this," I said softly. "That moment right there. That's your legacy," he agreed. "Not just the technology, but the moments it creates." Legacy. Such a complex word. My mother's legacy to me had been complicated: pain and resilience, rejection and determination, wounds that became motivations. My legacy to others would be different: tools for independence, validation of worth, doors opened rather than closed. The circle hadn't just been broken, it had been transformed into something new, something better. As Marcus and I headed inside to bed, I paused in the hallway, looking at the family photos that lined the wall. New ones had been added in recent years: my wedding, company milestones, holiday gatherings where I was no longer pushed to the margins but stood firmly in the center. The visual evidence of a family that had changed, that continued to change. Imperfect, still healing but moving forward together. In the end, that was the greatest victory. Not revenge or vindication or even forgiveness, but the freedom to write a new story that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. A story where the disabled daughter became not just successful, but essential. Where the mother who couldn't see her value became the champion of her cause. Where limitations, physical, emotional, and relational, became not endpoints, but starting points for transformation. Hey there! Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this emotional journey. I hope Nora's story resonated with you, whether you've experienced family difficulties yourself or simply understand what it means to fight for recognition and self-worth. If you connected with this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming obstacles and finding strength in unexpected places. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. I'd love to hear what this story meant to you. And remember, like Nora discovered, sometimes our greatest challenges become our greatest sources of power when we refuse to let others define our worth. Our limitations don't determine our possibilities. They simply clarify what we need to overcome. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember that your story is still being written and you hold the pen.